Folks, in true startup style, I'm going to request each of these panelists to first introduce themselves in literally an elevator pitch. 30 seconds to about 60 seconds elevator pitch introduction about yourself. And Himanshu, thoda sa aise ghum jaoge, to maybe we will be able to see each other as well. Why don't we start with you? We can start with an introduction of each of the panelists.
Thanks, Prajak. Hi, everyone. Very good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I'm Himanshu. I've had experiences, have about 18 years of experience working across industries like government in an advisory role. Before that, financial advisory. Before that, real estate. Today, I'm an advisor to institutions in the startup ecosystem and also a mentor to a lot of startups.
Himanshu, you might just want to talk about your experiences about driving the Invest India program.
Sure. So I was essentially leading a technology and innovations mission at Invest India. This is called the Agni mission, which is one of the 7 missions of the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council, headed by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor, reporting directly into the Prime Minister. We were essentially supporting early stage entrepreneurs to get access to market, to get access to funding, to get access to a lot of networking in the ecosystem outside.
And you also help them engage with the corporate ecosystem as well, right?
Absolutely.
As a part of the Invest India program.
Yes.
That's the mandate. And that's the perspective that we'll be looking at getting from you in the panel today. Arun?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arun Budakoti, and I'm part of Cisco. Just to quickly introduce myself, I am an INSEAD alum with about 22 odd years of experience in the industry. I'm currently part of Cisco's digital transformation office, where we are helping enterprises, deal with the disruptions that are happening in the marketplace through technology and innovations, and trying to solve their business problems to help optimize their operations and bring in cost savings.
So Arun, in today's conversation, we'll look to you for some examples of the kind of innovation that companies are doing, the ways that you guys are helping, but more importantly, we'd also like to understand what are the kind of innovation programs that companies are doing that help them tap into the external innovation ecosystem. We'll come to that in the panel.
It will be my pleasure to talk on that.
Abhay?
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Abhay Tandon. I am the Global Head of Digital Innovation or Digital Innovation Officer at TVS Motor Company and 9 other group companies. That's the source of my money that comes in. And then I wear another hat, which is the co-founder and GP at 321 Capital, through which I invest in startups. We have done about 27 investments, early stage emerging tech startups, right? And in terms of my background, I've spent a decade in the startup ecosystem in the country, the last 8 years in corporate innovation across companies like Target, Anheuser-Busch InBev, Lowe's, which are Fortune 30, Fortune 50 companies respectively, heading their corporate innovation entities. That's me.
Wonderful. So, folks on the panel today, we have really a mixed bag. And we've got people who run corporate innovation programs in different organizations. We've got Himanshu, who's observed as an outside, he's got an outside-in view in terms of what has worked and what has not worked in corporate innovation. And then we've, of course, got Arun, who's actually driving some of the innovation programs and collaborating with the companies. What we want to get out of the panel today is what are some of the best practices and learnings that they have seen of what works well. Now, the reason why this panel is important, I think, today is because every corporation today has a need for looking for innovation that is not happening within the company. They have a need to tap into the startup ecosystem, and they have to figure out how to incorporate those innovations into the organization. Some companies have been able to do it well, some companies not so well as well. But what would we like to, Himanshu, what I'd like to understand from, because you've seen it from an outsider's perspective, you've seen many innovation programs. What are the different kinds of programs that companies have done, and how serious have they been, and what has worked or not worked in your view?
Sure, Project. So I'd say a lot of organizations are coming today to the forefront to engage in acceleration programs, to engage in corporate innovation programs. In fact, there's research that says that from what the numbers were 10 to 15 years ago, today, almost 80% of the Fortune 100 companies also have corporate accelerator programs internally. So organizations are really looking forward to engage with the external ecosystem and leverage their knowledge.
But accelerator is only one form of innovation program. There'll be developer programs, there'll be incubation programs, there'll be corporate venture capital arms and so on, and internal innovation programs as well. In your view, when an organization jumps into embracing innovation, does it help to focus on one kind of program, or does it make sense to really tap into each of these forums and modules so that you're able to become more comprehensive in your search for innovation?
I think there are two programs that typically I've seen organizations focusing on. One is to engage with the startup ecosystem and help those startups accelerate within their own larger umbrella. The other is to also develop venture arms internally to be able to invest in these startups and ride on their long-term growth story. In fact, you'd see that over the last, let's say, 25-year number tells us that organizations or corporates or even individuals who actually got into private market investments have made 3 times more returns than investing into, let's say, public.
But is that a lens that most organizations would look at for their investments, or are these more strategic in nature? And I'm going to, Abhay, ask you to weigh in on that as well, because you've seen it on both sides. You've participated as an investor in some of these companies that may have got strategic investments as well. But Himanshu, your view in terms?
These are definitely more strategic in nature because today organizations a lot of times are unable to think out of the box, right? And think for certain emerging market technologies or emerging market innovations that they can't sort of execute themselves, and hence they lean on the startup ecosystem. And in most cases, it works to their advantage because sometimes they have a very tunnel vision of operating in a certain manner. The moment they start engaging with the external ecosystem, that's when they tend to benefit.
Fair enough. So developer programs, accelerator programs, incubation programs, corporate venture corporate venture capital arms, which will invest in companies. These are some of the modules in which they can engage with startups. Abhay, your view in whether it is, especially for corporates who are jumping into the startup engagement for the first time, would you recommend to them to do one thing at a time, or would you want them to start with everything so that it becomes very comprehensive? The same question that I'd asked.
Sure. So, Project, I'll take a step back and I'll like to tell the audience that there's a maturity curve of corporate innovation, right? And various organizations are at various facets of or various parts in that journey, right? Of going up the maturity curve. Now, when I look at corporate innovation across these companies that I've worked for, I've seen that they have different appetite for innovation. And startups is one way of innovating, like you mentioned, right? They're loosely held innovators, like Cisco, and I'm sure you would be able to answer that as well. But you tap into loosely held innovators as well. You tap into academia as well. You tap into various sources to build that innovation, sometimes bring them together to really solve for problems. And they look at it in 3 lenses. One is business as usual, solving for the incremental problems, right? Which will really plug in some of the gaps, which will generate results very, very quickly in the form of tangible KPIs. Then there's disruptive and then there's hybrid, right? Disruptive is where you're looking at not just the solutions which will solve for those immediate problems, but looking at more futuristic scenarios where you're trying to be the market creators or market leaders, right? And that's where the approach changes drastically in terms of how you want to tap into the startup ecosystem or the innovation ecosystem in the country or globally as well. And with these 2 approaches, when new entrants or incumbents who come in, or entrants who come in into the space of corporate innovation, what would make more sense is identify the lowest hanging fruit, which will be able to drive the results for your organization quickly over a period of 1 to 2 years, to start off with that, and then scale up with various different scenarios.
But you make a very important point, which is at the beginning of the journey, decide what kind of innovation you're looking for. Are you looking to improve some of the operational processes, or are you looking at jumping into something that can be quite disruptive? Because then one of the things that we've observed is that if the internal teams are not well aligned to what they want to get out and how they want to engage with the startups, those programs tend to die down very quickly, because then it just becomes a fashion show of some stuff, and it becomes like a initiative that really doesn't have any strategic value.
It's a
Would you
PR.
agree with that?
It's a PR.
Then it becomes a PR.
It becomes a PR very quickly. And I think if you're talking about 100 corporates or 200 corporates in the country, as per the latest reports who are doing corporate innovation, I would say at least 50% of them, they are just attracting talent through pushing out a narrative that there's a corporate innovation program out there, right? Or an accelerator program out there.
Fair enough. So have clarity about what you want to do, define what kind of programs you might want to do, and don't look only at startups, look at other forums as well. It could be academia, which could be independent developers, and including there could be people from within the organization who want to innovate and create modalities for them to be able to get it. Before we come into the investment parts of this, Arun, from your point of view, if you can help us understand, what are the kind of things that Cisco does for helping corporates, and you mentioned some of these initiatives, in helping them drive some of the innovative programs, and what are, in your observation, some of the things saying that, yaar, ye chalta hai, ye nahi chalta?
So, we at Cisco, we are one of the largest networking company working with most of the Fortune 500 companies across the globe, helping them in their digital transformation journey, helping them cope up with the disruption at all times. You look at pandemic today, and I would rather say that none of the CTOs of the best of companies would have ever thought that, and they have been planning for resiliencies, but nobody could have ever thought that at one go, the entire world will come to a standstill. So, pandemic has taught us a lot of things. And, we at Cisco are also running a lot of innovation programs internally to, cope up with the technological advancements. So like the co-panel suggested, there are multiple programs that we are running within the organization. One, obviously, there is a Launchpad program where we work with startups in the technology domain. So where we can actually, and we work very closely with them in making sure how we can create, make sure that the infrastructure or the backend technology core is more robust, more secure for them, so that they can scale it and when they're launching it in the market. So it's a quarterly program. We incubate a lot of startups every quarter. Some of them are really doing well, and we're proud to say that, especially in the supply chain and logistics domain. So there are a couple of startups that we shortlisted and we were working with them. The other program that we are running, and at times, what happens is that everything is might look very good on paper, but when you have to see how, what will happen when you actually roll it on the ground. So we have a program called Cisco's Country Digital Acceleration Program, where and we work with academies, academias, government bodies, different various industries, where we try and understand the business challenges that they're facing on the ground. And
Is this at a company level or is this at an industry level?
Industry level, but then what we do here is then we will identify an organization where we will try and make some investments. It is all Cisco investment, and we will probably create a solution or a proof of concept and make sure that the problem that the client is talking about has been solved on the ground. There are a lot of, at times what happens is there are a lot of best practices that are being adopted at a global level, but when you look at a company level or a country level, the challenges are a little different. So what we, with this program, we ensure that we are, solving the problem of that particular trade organization, and as far as it is concerned with the country.
So today in the audience, as I was talking to people, there are a lot of people from the FMCG and the consumer goods industries. Are there any specific programs that they can tap into via Cisco, or because you already have a repository of a number of innovations that you're already incubating or in touch with, is there a way in which this audience can tap into some of the resources that you already have?
Yeah, definitely. So, when we talk about CT investments, we are making investments across the industry. I mean, I have personally done some POCs, sponsored some POCs for Inland Waterway Authority of India, for one of the largest public sector ports in the country, which is the Deen Dayal Port. We have worked with Bayal Airport. I mean, I'm talking more from a logistics standpoint, and we've worked with a lot of FMCG organizations, some banking organizations, to help them solve their business problems through tech intervention. And that is where the investments have been made, and we run that program for a year. So it's not that we will show it to the client and get out of it. We'll say that we will run the show for you for 1 year, so that you understand the importance of technology, how it can help your organization, and then after 1 year you can decide to scale it up and expand it within the entire
And how
scope.
do you engage with the corporate innovation arms of large corporations or mid-sized companies?
So that is a continuous thing. But apart from when we talk about technology and innovation, one thing is very important, everything is changing. I mean, we being a tech giant also at times feel that, we are not able to address the, entire problem end to end. So there are three things that we do. One, we have, when we look at an industry per se, we look at solving the problem as a whole, so not as, what Cisco can do. So one, we work with the ecosystem that can work along with us, imbibe the solution along the entire offering and make sure that, how we can go as a solution or a problem solver rather than a product or a service organization. So that's what we do. And, constantly, like, my co-panel said, we are also looking at opportunities of investments. So, because when we look at technology or when we look at innovation, there is always a need to dip into more better minds. So one way is to, make strategic investments in terms of acquisitions so that we can fill the gap in the product line that we have. And also, apart from that, also get an additional talent pool.
Have you ever co-invested with CVCs of corporations or venture capital arms of companies?
We have, yes, we have that arm as well, where we are making strategic investments along with some VCs on certain specific projects which will be of interest to the VC as well. And obviously, our aim is to solve the larger problems for the organization and how, see how we can replicate the success across industries.
Got it. Abhay, you've seen this space now from 3 or 4 different organizations, AB InBev, Target, now with, TVS Logistics and stuff. How important is it for a company to earmark a budget for investments, or are startups willing to engage with you even if there are no investments coming in?
See, investments could be against equity, investments could be to do projects. Right?
Whichever way.
Whichever,
Whichever.
right? So investments are always earmarked, right, for strategic projects. And I think most organizations who are slightly higher up on the maturity curve know and understand there's a potential failure that can occur in some of these partnerships, right? That the success rate is going to be a smaller number, right? And keeping that in mind, they know that they've earmarked X amount of budget, which may not really result in outcomes immediately.
That's fair. I'm just trying to understand, is it if a corporate says that, look, I want to now really engage with the startup ecosystem or the innovation ecosystem, academia and otherwise, and I want to get that. Can the corporation start with a smaller budget and say, let's go and see what's there? Or do they really have to carve out a significant amount of money for investing in startups? Only then it becomes meaningful. Otherwise, it doesn't become meaningful. I'm just trying to understand
So,
how people can get in and
so I
participate
think
in this.
400K, 500K a year is the minimum budget that you would need to at least start doing some proof of concepts, right? And that's the most minimum number I'm seeing, and that has worked out for multiple organizations, right? And this does not, of course, include investments in startups from an equity standpoint, right? Or the venture standpoint. I'm talking about just for projects. I've had budgets that I've seen in a scale of anything between $500,000 way back in Target in 2015, 2016 to $2 million plus in lows to a larger corpus, even in an Indian, global conglomerate like TVS, which is an Indian company by origin, right? And presence in 86 countries. But there, when you talk about acquisitions or investments in startups, outside of the projects, that's also a large corpus that they've kept aside for a lot of these strategic investments as well.
And outside of the investments that go into the startup, what kind of budget is important for a company to keep? How much does it cost to get into a corporate innovation mode?
See, again, it depends from a company to company and the sector and industry they are in.
मोटा-मोटी कितना पैसा लगता है? 20-25 लाख, 1 crore, 2 crore, कितना? What kind of budget do they need to keep aside?
R&D intensive company hai. If it's an R&D intensive company like TVS, right? You don't see fires in our bikes. And that's primarily because it's R&D intensive. And because of that, the expenditure is a lot higher, right? To ensure that those things don't happen. But agar aap digital innovation ki baat kare, like something that I handle, which is comparatively, easier to achieve, right? In some senses of it, as against physical R&D. I think 6-8 crore kar do agar aap saal ka, to I think that is a good
That's a large budget. And Himanshu, what's your observation in terms of the companies that, sort of were doing corporate innovation programs? The kind of companies that Zinnov and some of these guys, sort of do those programs for. Is it a 25, 50 lakh kind of annual investment enough for saying that, look, let me do something meaningfully on the innovation side?
There are two ways to look about it. Organizations that run cohorts will definitely have a budget around it because they know that they have to engage with a certain number of startups at least once or a couple of times in a year, right? So they might earmark, let's say, a 25 lakhs per cohort. By cohort, I mean they want to engage with 10, 15 startups, at once.
This is not investments in startup. This is just for managing the
This
program.
is just for managing the program. Investments is absolutely separate. There are other kinds of organizations who will engage with startups on an ongoing basis and will not have any cohort at all, right? So they will say, and there's a very large a global logistics company which engages with 5 or 6 startups in India on an ongoing basis. They might pick up 5 in March and not pick up anything else for the rest of the year, right? They do not earmark a budget. Depending on what the engagement is going to be, depending on how they want to engage with that particular startup, on what level, how much the pilot is going to cost, they will keep pumping funds behind that, right? So they might not put anything on the table, right? They might not even invest in startups, right? In fact, when organizations and large corporates engage with startups see early revenues coming in, and they, that makes them independent of any external funding that they might need in the early stages, right? So they might not really need any funds to be put on the table.
And this question is for both Himanshu and for Abhay, because you've seen it from different angles. Who should be driving the innovation program? Should it be an external agency that works well? Or should it be somebody internal, and should companies create internal teams to drive an innovation program?
My sense is a lot of organizations today have internal teams as well, and they also lean on external platforms and external boutique firms who are doing this. What happens internally is internal innovation teams sometimes engage with the startups, not fully knowing what the business might really want. It is perceived that they will know what the business might really want, but startups do not end up engaging with the business heads or the core decision makers for that particular pilot. And a lot of front ending is done with, and please beg to differ with this, a lot of front ending is done by these innovation teams. You definitely, I think, need external help somewhere, which is more customized to that particular engagement, to that particular need of the corporate, where an external expert comes in and tells, right, who needs to be brought in from the business now to be able to develop this pilot, right? Sometimes it, sort of doesn't work out.
So an internal team can be a better interface with the business units, but an external partner will get in the best practices and the processes that will help leverage this engagement a lot better with the startup.
I'm assuming that external person is an industry expert and understands a lot about how.
Is it an industry expert or an innovation program management expert?
I would say an industry expert.
What's the role of innovation program management companies that come and advise corporations in doing these programs? Is there value, and should companies who are trying innovation for the first time, should they engage with these advisory companies before they start doing things on their own?
I think the role is twofold. One is to give them access to a very nicely curated pipeline of these startups, where these startups are going to come from. That's one. So these organizations, the large companies, get access to who the best startups in that particular space are, where the research is happening, who's building the best technology, right? Because they're sitting on a huge database. Second, they know the processes. So what kind of processes should a large corporate follow? When you're bringing in a startup, right? What different, I will say, levels that startup should go through in that 3-month, 4-month, 6-month kind of a period, right? So that engagement is fruitful both for the startup and for the, for the organization who's supporting that startup, right? And it's just not seen eventually as, like Abhay mentioned earlier, as a PR activity, right? That they wanted to engage with the startup for 6 months, and they did, and a lot of, PR and, social media buzz was created around it. So that's something.
So after I ask Abhay this question, I'm going to ask both of you to weigh in on, if you have any examples of really successful corporate innovation programs and something that may have been, wow, my God, I mean, this created so much of value for them. So just think about it, Abhay. In your view, who should be driving the program internally? Should it be somebody, should each business unit define their use case, or should there be a corporate level mandate in terms of saying, here's what we are doing? What have you seen work better?
So two things, right? And I'll add on to what Himanshu just said from the previous point as well. In the previous three organizations, again, $100 billion top line, typically in each of these three organizations, Target, AB, and Web and Lowe's. I didn't partner with an external agency prima facie as the core operations of the program. I partnered with agencies for very specific tasks, right? Could it,
Like for example?
like, for example, I want to organize a large scale event and I want to make sure that that percolation of the invite or the audience is wide and wider than my network or the organization's network, right? So I'm asking an agency to partner with us and make sure that they are the organizers of that event, right? I could reach out to them when I see that there's a strong subject matter expertise in terms of sourcing solutions to very specific challenges that I'm outsourcing, right? So there are few places where I've outsourced some part of the work, but I am a strong believer that innovation this approach has to be a hybrid approach with a lot of stake internally because we know how internally how to run the programs and we understand what the internal requirements are much more effectively than an external person
So
does.
in a way, you were a subject matter expert that was brought in by the corporate to run the internal innovation program. But in
Yeah.
the absence of an Abhay being inside the organization, would you suggest that they try something on their own or
No.
get
No,
an
I mean, it depends, right? Who's the team? Like, for example, in most organizations, you have someone called as a program manager for innovation, right? And I think at Lowe's, I completely disagreed with this approach and I came up with the product management approach. I said that, innovators or innovation teams are not just the guys who are project managing a innovation charter and licensing, or creating the licensing between business heads and startups. That's not the job, right? We're not project managers. Our job is to bring innovation. And that means you have to figure out the exact needs of what the business and the consumer want, right? And for that, sometimes businesses also are not aware of that, right? Business heads also not aware of it. So you need product managers who are looking at the consumer lens, who are looking at the business lens, and who are looking at the product innovation angle, coming up with a scientific hypothesis, coming up with tangible outcomes that need to be done in a scientifically derived methodology. So that's where the innovator's role is.
So you're reinforcing your point that you made earlier. Think through what you want to do and then figure out how you want to do it, much like anything else. Define the objective and build a strategy around it and execute to that.
Can I give you an example of that?
Of course.
At Lowe's, we launched a line of products around nanotechnology and graphene in home improvement, right? And no one would have in home improvement thought about graphene as a line of products, right, for elderly. And when we spoke to the business gave us a bunch of problem statements. They felt that these could be the interesting products from a business impact standpoint. Completely realizing that they're not focused on what the consumers wanted, right? So we partnered with the American Association for Retired People, interviewed 60 plus elderly citizens there and realized that the stack ranking done by the business was completely off the charts, right? We had to relook at the whole thing. And then when we solved for that problems or those set of problems, the market response was way better. So my point is that businesses also sometimes do not really know what their problems really are. So you need a combination of someone who can really look at the external lens and internal lens and marry them both.
Arun, when it comes to supply chain, a lot at very valid points with Abhay. When it comes to supply chain, a lot of companies now recognize the problems that they're dealing with because of the changed environment, like omni-channel, the whole need to build resilience, the quick commerce and stuff. The traditional supply chains are just not relevant in today's context, and they have to completely redesign that. So, in some ways, most of the organizations that are faced with the issue of redesigning the supply chain have their problem statements really well known. What are the kind of things that you guys do to help people address their supply chains better?
and rather than supply chain, I would rather suggest, a bigger problem that we're trying to solve as an organization. So, and the program that we're running in the country, for India to become a 5 trillion economy, logistics and supply chain is one of the most important sectors.
Correct.
So, any breakage in the, in the supply chain will have a ripple effect around the end-to-end traceability. And that's where what we, Cisco is talking about creating a mind share, or, or probably, as a thought leader or as a technology thought leader, what we're trying to say is, what first thing first, at a country level, what is required is we need a data exchange for the supply chain logistics sector, which means irrespective of the mode of transport that the, that any organization is using, they should be able to trade, goods are. So that, whether it is aviation, whether it is maritime, whether it is, they're using the inland waterway. That's one part of it. And it's a big project. Two, the other important thing and one of the best practices, and especially where we are lacking as a country, is on the turnaround of operations at the, let's say ports or the airports per se. So what we are helping organizations, using of technology, whether it is camera vision, whether it is, IoT sensors, in making sure that the turnaround operations are much faster, and it is giving better insights to the people inside the organization as to how their operations are happening, so that with better visibility they can do better decision making.
So
So-
digitizing the processes and giving visibility so that there are operational efficiencies that come in, which use the existing resources better. But and that's really valid in any case, especially for logistics, where we know that our spends on logistics, etc., are said to be a lot higher than, global trends and stuff like that. However, while that is business as usual and doing, operational efficiencies, there are still areas around which complete redesigning of the of networks is required. For example, an FMCG company or a consumer goods company which used a traditional distribution model in the old world before the omni-channel way, they had a distribution way, distributor tha, sub distributor tha, retailer ke paas pahunch jata tha, warehouses, godowns, etc. Everything was okay. In a place like Delhi, for example, Manesar mein godown hota, chal jata tha. Now, in today's environment, with all the newer things like micro warehouses, local, hyper-local, deliveries and stuff like that, those old models don't work. And therefore, they have to really look at how to synchronize with every other stakeholder available. And that synchronization will require a lot of connectivity and all those things. Are you guys doing anything around that?
Yeah, so, one of the large automotive companies in India, we are working with them very closely in terms of realigning the entire, distribution network or the dealership network, and how they engage with the end client. So earlier it was like, people will walk into the showrooms or, to check the car and all. Now everything is possible virtually. So that is what we are, enabling them or working with them very closely to create a digital twin of the dealership network.
And in this case, for example, did the car company come to you, or do you go to specific industries with saying that, like, hey, this is what your company needs? I'm just trying to understand how does this audience engage with
So we
you?
have a very large team that interacts with the industry very closely. So, and then we have a partner ecosystem as well. So we come to know of the challenges, and at times we go or they come to us,
Got
because
it.
it's a long-term engagement that we have.
Himanshu, any examples that come to mind where you've seen, my God, this really works so well for this company and they created so much value?
Not specific startup examples, but a couple
No,
of
not startup, but a
Yeah.
corporate innovation
Yeah.
example where they really benefited from engaging with the external innovation world.
couple of corporate innovation programs that come to mind, which I personally like, and I think they're doing a great job, is one, the Microsoft for startups, right? Their speed to onboard startups and the speed to then take those startups to market to their global client base, introducing these startups and their technologies, is fantabulous. The other is, I'd say a Qualcomm Design India Challenge, right? Qualcomm does a great job in, they also, the speed with which they onboard. They do cohorts, multiple cohorts, but how they onboard and how then they follow up their top ones with investments from the Qualcomm's venture arm is really commendable, right? So that's the end-to-end support that the startups get. What I've also seen personally in these two programs is they don't dominate the startups too much, in the sense that you don't get a feeling that the startup eventually is just building for a Microsoft or a Qualcomm, right? They are building their own product, so their scalability is not hindered by anything, by what Microsoft or Qualcomm or what any other organization might want them to do. So they have freedom to operate, right? That freedom, I think, if an organization who's working with a startup can still offer the startup, because that still is an independent entity and might eventually become big on its own, right? So that's something that is really special.
Got it. Got it. Thanks. Abhay, tech companies by and large were the early adopters of innovation programs and stuff, and that's understandable. A lot of these companies do great jobs. He gave two great examples, Qualcomm, Microsoft. On the consumer goods, FMCG side, P&G, Levers, and all of these companies have now started doing their innovation programs. Marico has been doing it for a while. What comes to mind when you think of saying, oh my God, this really was a very successful program, a very well done program outside of the tech world?
I think if I can talk about banking, that was another area where multiple programs really solved for some big problems, right? Could be SocGen, could be Barclays. Barclays, in fact, was one of the first ones in the country to come up with a program called RISE, right? Which was pretty successful in terms of a lot of deployments that they had. So was the case with Societe Generale as well, for a long time that they've been able to solve for it, right? I'm not too sure about too many FMCG, but if you remember, even Anheuser-Busch InBev at one point of time, I think a couple of years back, were one of the first companies to even test out NFTs for one of their products called Stella Artois, which is a beer, right? And how they were able to do a bunch of financial transactions around that in a very systematic way. So,
You guys at ABN have also run the program for reverse logistics, right?
yes.
How successful was that, and what did how, I think we've got just about 5 minutes, so if you can, time is up.
Yeah.
Okay, we stop. No problem. But if you can take 1 minute to really, because we've got a 10-minute, folks, is it okay if we use that 10-minute break and we can continue in about 5 minutes with the startups that are presenting? Makes sense. Thanks. So if you can just, because this might be relevant for the audience, talk about the problem statement and talk about the outcome that came out of this reverse logistics innovation program that you guys ran at ABN Bev.
This was post my stint that this particular program came out, but the inception of that started with a bunch of problems around the overall value chain, right? Right from, one of the funniest problems that I've come in my life was that, AB and Bev refrigerators were disappearing off the face of the planet without us knowing about it. And these were placed in the various points of sale stores. And every year we were incurring about $700 million of spend on replenishing refrigerators. And it was funny that, how can a refrigerator just go out of a point of sales environment, right? So when we started solving for that, we started looking at the whole value chain problem. And then we realized it was a $1.8 billion problem that we were trying to solve for. And we got very good early signs of value in terms of, us coming up to a plan with a detailed plan with some good POCs across different parts of the country, as well as China and Africa. The results were very promising, which would have meant that, over a 3-year plan, we could have either created a lot of revenue opportunity or saved a lot of costs amounting to about $1.8 billion per year.
And were you able to solve that?
Yes, we were able to, we put that, the results were good, but not fully solved for, I would say. It would have been a phased-wise approach.
Great. Folks, thanks. As most of you know, that the reason why you're all here is because supply chain is a source of competitive advantage for most corporations. But supply chain is the one area that really is going through a lot of change, because with the change environment, omni-channel, e-commerce and quick commerce and hyper-local, etc. And the only way that the redesigning of the supply chains can become a lot more efficient for corporations is if they are able to engage with the larger innovation ecosystem and startups who are actually driving a lot of digitization and technology and bringing in a whole bunch of technology. This is also a good segue to the next segment, where 6 of our curated companies are going to be presenting what they are doing in either disrupting or optimizing supply chains across every function. And supply chain, by the way, as you guys already know, is a lifeline of every business, and it cuts across every function, whether it's planning, procurement, manufacturing, distribution. And the kind of companies that we have today are actually taking different aspects of that. So we've got something like a Stylumia that is doing a deep tech, using deep tech and AI for demand estimation, to people who are optimizing cold logistics, to people who are optimizing warehouse operations using robotics, to people who are helping large FMCG brands distribute and extend their distribution much more efficiently into tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So with that, I'm going to thank the panel.